The Medical Care Advisory Committee, made up of Medicaid providers and recipient representatives, has a grim task to cut fat from a Medicaid program, which they say is already skin and bones. The committee's action will mean at least a cutback in services, at most, the loss of complete programs. State Finance Director Joe Broadwater told the group that proration will hit the Medicaid department hardest. The loss of nearly $18 million in state funds means the agency will lose an additional $46 million in federal matching money. Medicaid providers, the people who provide drugs, physician care, and run nursing homes, say they are already providing services at near cost, and in some cases, even at a loss. Mildred Job, who runs a nursing home in Camden and serves on the committee, says if she takes a 15% cut in funding, it will put her into bankruptcy. Medicaid staffers say it's not unrealistic that providers could be asked to take a 20% cut. Unless the advisory committee can come up with some big money-saving measures, Medicaid Commissioner Faye Baggiano says recipients of the program will be hurt.
Do you anticipate people dropping out of the program because of proration?
Nursing homes would be bankrupt. From what we heard today, physicians and hospitals would probably drop out of the program rather than take a 20% cut in their rates.
Which means what for the indigent people of Alabama?
Services would not be available.
Although the committee drafted a resolution asking Governor James to exclude Medicaid from proration, it will meet in about 2 weeks to begin the more realistic process of cutting programs. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
Former Governor Wallace says he never asked for, nor would he ever accept any financial or other help from the National Democratic Party. While touring the Jefferson County Courthouse, the governor was asked about the possible association of himself and liberal Democrats like Ted Kennedy and Tip O'Neill.
You put all the national liberals of the Republican Party and Democratic Party in a bag, a sack, and shake them up and turn it up, and the first one that dropped out, you'd put him right back in because they're all the same thing. So I have been to conventions where people of different persuasions were there, and when you go to a Republican convention, you go there where the Rockefellers are and the Jabbets are, and the people of that sort. So it's tit for tat on that.
Governor Wallace says it was those liberal Democrats that made him run for president as an independent. And Wallace says now he's an Alabama Democrat, unique from national Democrats. But he says it's flattering to know that the national Democrats, who he says once shunned him, now seek his party affiliation. And the governor says the Republicans have their fair share of liberals, so he says the associations are tit for tat. Tonight, the former governor will be trying to turn the attention away from the possible affiliation to the National Democratic Party toward the solidarity of the State Democratic Party, and more specifically, a possible endorsement of Wallace by George McMillan, the man Wallace beat in the Democratic primary runoff. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Jefferson County Courthouse.
To require all of the schools throughout the state of Alabama to test, to check, to find out if they have any asbestos related materials in their institutions. I further am asking the court to require them to get a plan, should they find asbestos, to make a plan on how it should be removed and replaced. When it crumbles and falls through the air, that it suspends in the air for a long period of time. It's invisible to the neck.
We found that most Alabama citizens attend some type of arts activities. when asked what type they would like to have a chance to participate more in, one of the main interests was in live theater. And working with the council through the past few years, I have seen that growth really increase in the local communities, and just local community theater as well as professional groups.
A news conference in Phoenix City began Falmer's sweep through Russell County. Falmer told reporters he thinks his opponent George Wallace is refusing to take campaign money from the National Democratic Party because news of the offer leaked out and Wallace didn't want to get caught. Later, Falmer met with about 60 supporters. He told them he'd like to see an end to social promotions and a return to discipline in the classroom. Then it was on to a lumber yard in Hatchachubby to shake hands and ask for votes.
What you do around here?
Everything.
Everything?
Yeah.
Everything? Sound like me, he bragging a little bit, doesn't he?
Do. Oh,
huh?
Do
huh? You look like you can do everything.
Yeah, just about it.
All right, I need to get in the Indian wrestling contest with you.
You might win.
Falmer gave a brief but spirited speech from a stack of wood on a forklift. He said Alabama needs more jobs, and to get those jobs, Alabama needs good government and a good leader. The main street of nearby Hurtsboro was next, with Falmer going door to door handing out campaign material. At City Hall, Falmer told the crowd about his plans to bring Alabama to a standard of excellence. According to Falmer, Alabama's been mediocre so long it doesn't even hurt anymore. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News with the Falmer campaign in Hurtsboro.
Thank you with this flag. Ed Reed, North America. Sirs, this reads the same as Dr. Sam. Bob.
Men, I'll always keep the spirit on everything.
The governor is just minutes away from taking his run on the stage.
We need to get some things straightened out.
And the governor hasn't spoken yet. He has told me that he fully intends to tell the audience that he will vote for George Wallace. No one has opinion saying that
Yes, ma'am.
the cylinder now held in
Good to see you. Yes, sir.
the Democratic Party in light of House Speaker General Forkdale's
I want him to be eminently successful, because I don't care who gets the credit for it. I want to see people in Birmingham working. I want to see people use Mr. Reagan and bring Rockefeller, Nelson Rockefeller, and David Rockefeller, and Javits, and why, who can be more ultra-liberal than the Rockefellers and the Javits? Well, the Rockefellers almost run the world, and they're ultra-liberals, and I'm not, they're Republican. And so it's just like I said in 1960, you know the word blame, blame, blame.
But they are associated with the National Democratic Party?
Well, I've always called myself an Alabama Democrat.
Optimism runs high here at AUM entering this 1982-83 basketball season. And well, it should. Coach Larry Chapman returns 5 starters off of last year's Southern States Conference co-champion. But the disappointment of failing to make the NAIA District 27 playoffs with a 20-10 record last season is still fresh on the mind of Chapman and his Senators. He's hoping for better things this year, and with all but one player back from last season and an impressive group of freshmen waiting in the wings, there's plenty of reason for excitement.
Rick, we are pleased that we have maturity this year on our team. We have never had 5 seniors on our basketball team since I've been here in 5 years. I think this year we have the best opportunity we've ever had to win the district and to win the national championship, and that's what we're after.
You know, we had a good team last year, real good team, but, you know, we even have a better team this year. You know, we got some great freshmen we brought in, so I think we're going to be stronger this year.
By us having 5 seniors on the team, you know, we're going to be pretty good if all of them, you know, show the leadership that they should.
The Senators get the season started early. They tip it off against LaGrange College November 16th at AUM. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
The Brewers broke a scoreless tie in the fourth with the count 3-2. Cecil Cooper doubled into right field. Robin Yount with good speed scored all the way from first. It became 1-0 Milwaukee. Then the Brewers turned a pair of sacrifice flies into runs. This fly ball to left field scored Ted Simmons, and it became 3-0 Milwaukee. In the seventh, the foul tip-off, Don Sutton jumped up and hit Doug DeSensei in the nose, sending the Angels infielder to the ground. Trainers packed his nose with cotton, and DeSensei was able to continue. In the Milwaukee seventh, Paul Molitor sent a Mike Witt pitch into the left field seats. The two-run shot gave the Brewers a healthy 5-0 lead. But California finally got to Sutton in the eighth. Bob Boone sends this fly ball to left field. Now watch this. Cecil Cooper tries to make the catch, but cannot. It was ruled a home run. Now the replay supports the Brewers' argument that a fan had interfered with Cooper's ability to make that catch. Milwaukee lost the decision. It was 5-1. California added 2 more runs in the eighth. The final blow, an RBI double off the bat of Fred Lynn. Pete Ladd came on in relief of Sutton, and Milwaukee held on to win 5-3. Game 4 of the series tomorrow afternoon.
Well, you had yourself a day, my friend John Powell, didn't you?
Yes, it was beautiful. It was one of those days that you think about. Everything was on top water. I could have caught 30 or 35 fish, but
How come
I did.
you could fish topwater all day?
Well, it was dark and rainy, and this time of the year, that's just the thing you're looking for. It was, you know, damp and cold, not cold, but cooler than it's been being, and they were hitting anything that you wiggled on top in the right place. Of course, you had to put the lure in the right place.
If these pros get here and with conditions like this, are they going to burn it up?
They will. They surely will. They'll set a new classic record if it's a day like today.
What do you think? How do you think the river's going to fish? Of course, conditions make all the difference, but is it going to do as good as it did last year?
Well, it'll do a lot better, and I'm thinking it'll do a lot better than it did last year.
They're going to know more, most of them, huh?
Yes, that's one thing. At least half of them are going to know more, and it's open to a different segment of the river. The last 8 miles, the big part of the lake is open this year.
I hear they're bigger bass down there.
And they're bigger bass down there. And, of course, this topwater action has now started. And if it's rainy, I really feel that they'll set a new classic record.
It was late in the first quarter before either team got anything going. Dennis Lippert put a halt to a Lanier drive when he picked off the Stan Kirkland pass at the Enterprise 26. 2 plays later, quarterback David Coffey out of the wishbone finds in Jeffrey Wright wide open deep in the Lanier secondary. It connects for a 79-yard touchdown with the point after. Wildcats led it 7-0, 1:11 left in the first. Second quarter now, Greg Johnson gives Enterprise some great field position when he hauls in this punt at his own 30. Picking up his blockers, he heads to the sidelines, runs into his own man, and is finally hauled down out of bounds at the Lanier 30. After moving to the 6, the Wildcats' drive is halted when Jerome Sanders picks off this Coffey pass in the end zone. From there, it was a standoff. Second-ranked Enterprise bumps off Lanier. The final from Crampton Bowls, 7-0.
I tell them they got my boy here too.
Congressman Dickinson came to help Clayton's 1,600 residents celebrate the 150th birthday of their town. A small but enthusiastic crowd greeted the congressman in the Barber County Courthouse, and he returned their enthusiasm with some of his own.
Things are not as bad as they have been and not as good as they're going to be, but I do believe that we have turned the corner. I do believe that the economy is on the upswing. I do believe that we're in the very near future going to see substantial improvements in the economy.
But the congressman's optimism was tempered by admissions that these are, quote, sort of bad times, and the economic scene this election year is not what Republicans would like it to be. Clayton is the hometown of Democratic gubernatorial nominee George Wallace. It is an agricultural community, and though unemployment here isn't the problem it is in larger cities, there is some anti-Republican sentiment.
The economy is always a factor in an election. People just sort of vote their pocketbooks quite often. So I think things will get better, and I think if there's a perception on the part of the American people that things are better and are heading in the right direction and we're on a true course, I think they'll be inclined to say, well, let's give it a chance to work.
Mr. Dickinson says the economic recovery is not here yet. It will take a little more time. For now, he's busy talking about lower inflation and interest rates, trying to convince voters that better times are coming. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News in Clayton.
All of the Saturday afternoon activity wasn't spent on the gridiron, but when you can't see the football action from the 50-yard line, you do the next best thing.
Dropping straight back, looking, trying to find somebody full. Going down, just won it at the 35-yard line in Penn State territory. Comes up, tries to find a man. He runs to his right. He is going to throw. He does. He gets the two. The catcher Bentos. He gets the two.
Just about everywhere you turn, there was a radio in every corner of the Big Selma Riverfront Market Day Festival, and just about every football fan's ears were tuned into the action at Legion Field in Birmingham.
Alabama, 24-14.
They won't win. Alabama.
I did manage to find at least one fan who was switching back and forth on his radio listening to both games, but not everybody had football on his mind. And not all of the thousands of household crafts were American-made.
Things like this, rather unusual. Or these little things like this. Baskets. I used to make these out of colored paper as a child.
From one corner of the downtown Selma Street to the other, there was something for everybody. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News in Selma.
500 or 600 Democrats sat through a long night of preliminaries waiting to hear from the lieutenant governor. The dinner was yet another in a series of efforts by the state Democrats to show solidarity, an effort to counter former Democratic candidate Joe McCorkdale's endorsement of Republican Emery Palmer. McMillan did his part in showing solidarity by saying he thought it was important to vote for the nominees of his party, but he took it a step further and specifically said he would vote for George Wallace in November.
For the greatest political legend that this state has ever seen, a person with whom I have certain philosophical differences, a person with whom I have just been through a very painful political contest, but a person in whom, when all things relative are considered, I want to be our next governor.
In a brief response, Wallace said he didn't expect half the enthusiasm McMillan offered and asked for McMillan's supporters to work as hard for him as they did for the lieutenant governor. The evening was tagged as a Yellow Dog Democrat dinner, with Yellow Dog awards and lots of comedic jabs at the Republican Party. But the lieutenant governor warned that it will take more than comedy to defeat the Republicans in November.
If we as Democrats are going to promise any substantive future to this state and to this nation, it's got to be based on something better than putting down Republicans. It's got to be based on positive, substantive ideas that we are capable of implementing.
Chris Brimshaw, WSFA TV News in Birmingham.
And they look to the merits of an idea in terms.
An indication of things to come came early in the game. Jackie Klein pours through to block this Ralph Giacomello punt deep in Penn State territory. Mike Pitts finally recovers at the 14, and the Tide is in business. 4 plays later on 1st and goal, Walter Lewis off the fake, keeps left with a touchdown early in the first. Bama leads at 7-0. But Penn State roared right back. Todd Blackledge off the play action finds Kurt Warner behind the Tide defense. The big halfback rambles 69 yards, untouched for the score. Still early in the first, the game's tied at 7. But Bama came right back with a 72-yard drive. Lewis to Joe Carter from 6 yards out, made it a 14-7 game early in the second. After a Rocky Coleman interception gave Bama the ball at their own 19, Lenny Patrick capped a 9-play drive, taking it over on this 11-yard jaunt up the middle, and Alabama had a 21-7 lead going to the locker room in half. Early in the third now, Penn State deep in Tide territory. Blackledge to Mike McCluskey is complete to the 10, but he fumbles. Stan Gay makes the recovery for Alabama, stopping the Lion threat. But Penn State got it in the end zone after a 49-yard drive. John Williams scoring on 1st and goal off the reverse with a good block from Blackledge. Bama's lead now cut to 21-14. A Peter Kim field goal made it 24-14 heading to the fourth. Blackledge then took Penn State 75 yards in 11 plays. The TD coming on this 11-yard pass to Kevin Bow. It's a new ball game, 24-21 Bama. Another Kim field goal made it 27-21. Then the unbelievable, the play of the game. Giacomello back to punt. His own man, Mike Suter, steps in front of him and blocks the kick. After a scramble, Alabama will recover it at the Penn State 12. 2 plays later, Patrick gets his second TD, a 6-yard run wide. A try for 2 made it 35-21 Alabama. Eddie Lowe capped off the Crimson Tide scoring, intercepting Blackledge for the 4th time on the day. He returns it 31 yards for the touchdown. 42-21, that's where it ended. 4th-ranked Alabama knocking off number 3 Penn State.
It was 1 year ago that Ray Scott handed young Stanley Mitchell a check for $41,500, the winner's share of the 11th Bass Masters Classic.
Coach, he is a great fisherman, and I know a lot of folks in Montgomery and all throughout this part of Alabama were here to watch that young man work along with 40 other fishermen, and here again, 41 more will be back this week.
You've increased the seating capacity for the weigh-ins because of the large crowd?
We had to. We had over 4,000 there. We've got 6,000 seats this year, but I expect it to be pretty near full every day.
And the boat show, tell us about it.
Well, the boat show is free of charge, and this is a weigh-in, I might add, all in the Civic Center, starting at 3 o'clock, the weigh-ins in the afternoon. But the boat shows will be open, and the tackle show is open from 12 on right on through the evening. So it should be a fantastic afternoon for anybody who can come down and be a part of the show, see the greatest selection of tackle and boat equipment, whatever available anywhere, plus the excitement of the weigh-in. It should be really exciting.
How about the river?
The river's going to be good, I think. It's down just a little bit now without being hurt. We don't get any kind of radical change in the weather. I think we'll have a good day.
I think today they are in the forefront of the economic as well as the socio-economic struggle of society as well as the church itself. But even in the forefront, we need to reassess where we should be today and tomorrow, and it means that we have to come together and share thoughts, strategies, and methodologies to help get to the place tomorrow, the desired place, not only for ourselves, but for our children and our children's children as well.
Rising up, back on the street, took my time, took my chances, went the distance, now I'm back on my feet, just a man and his will to survive. So many times it happens too fast, you trade your passions for glory, don't lose your grip on the dreams of the past. Just to keep them alive.
Joe McCorkadale claims he wasn't turning away from the Democratic Party, but instead putting the interest of the state ahead of party loyalty. The Democrats were still outraged. They called him a turncoat and unappreciative of the Democratic banner, a banner McCorkadale and his father represented in office for a half a century. Democratic candidates and office holders gathered the next week to prove their support for each other. Friday night, George McMillan, who lost the Democratic primary runoff to three-time Governor George Wallace, joined the solidarity effort and tried to counter the McCorkadale move.
Now, I'm here this evening because I'm glad to be here and because I think that it's important on November the 2nd that we elect our nominees.
Solidarity has become the latest Democratic theme. Even Governor George Wallace preached solidarity.
That I have supported the Democratic ticket every time. I've never, except one time I had to run.
That one time being his 1968 presidential bid as an independent, for which he asked forgiveness.
Although I'm not apologizing for it, I was very happy to run in those years, but I did run on the Democratic ticket in Alabama.
But the Democrats don't appear to hold that against Wallace. But it appears McCorkadale might not be forgiven. He was chastised during the recent Democratic dinner. Lieutenant Governor nominee Bill Baxley showed a book called All I Know About Loyalty. The pages were blank. The McCorkadale incident has spurred on a party unity that even this year's Republican push hasn't mustered. As one Democrat put it, McCorkadale's endorsement of Republican Emily Farmer may have done more for the Democrats than the Republicans. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
It is believed the last time Jackson was seen alive by anyone other than the person or persons who killed him was on the night of April 28th. That's when Jackson left the Trailways bus station in Montgomery carrying at least one passenger in his cab. He was headed for the Madison Park area on Montgomery's northern edge. A short while after he left, he radioed his base station to find out the charge for transportation to Madison Park. That's the last time anyone heard from him. Early the next morning, state troopers found Jackson's cab abandoned on Interstate 65 not far from Fort Deposit. The car was out of gas and the radio microphone cord had been cut. Later the same morning, Jackson's body was found back in the Madison Park area in a place called Dagger Hole. Police at the time speculated robbery was a possible motive for the murder. Jackson had been severely beaten and strangled. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Two crucial blocked punts propelled Alabama to their big win over Penn State in Birmingham. The first came here early in the opening stanza when Jackie Klein poured through to knock down this Ralph Giacomello punt, giving Bama the ball at the Penn State 14. Walter Lewis then scored on a keeper to put the Tide up 7-0. They roared out to a 21-7 halftime lead before the Nittany Lions made their move. Todd Blackledge threw 3 touchdown passes. The last one here to Kevin Bowell from 11 yards out pulled Penn State within 24-21 early in the fourth quarter. After a Peter Kim field goal made it 27-21, disaster struck for Penn State. Up back, Mike Suter backs into a Giacomello punt, giving Bama the break they needed and the ball deep in Penn State territory midway through the fourth quarter. From the 6, Lenny Patrick scores his second TD of the day to make it 35-21. An Eddie Lowe touchdown off a Blackledge interception capped the scoring and Alabama's 42-21 win. The Tide now braces for their annual battle with Tennessee next Saturday in Knoxville. Meanwhile, on the Plains yesterday, Auburn rode the record-setting performance of place kicker Al Del Greco to an 18-3 win over Kentucky. It was a fumbled Wildcat punt that set up the first of 6 Del Greco field goals. It comes here from 22 yards out to make it a 3-0 game Tigers. Del Greco's effort set a new Southeastern Conference record and tied an NCAA mark. The shortest was from 22, the longest from 39 yards out. This 38-yarder with 1:35 left in the game proved to be the record setter. Auburn posted their second SEC win without a loss. They host Georgia Tech next Saturday on the Plains. We'll have more on the Auburn-Kentucky game on the Auburn Football Review, which immediately follows this newscast.
Tiger beat! Tiger beat!
Mighty proud of you for coming out and playing as hard as you did and fighting them like you did. I don't think you could have won the football game without it. Defensively, we had to have a lot of good things over there to keep them off the board as far as out the end zone. Still making too many mistakes, and there's a lot of improving to do. We're at a point. We're at a point now, man. Where for us to get better, we got to get well. We got to get well, we've got to get quick, and we've got to cut out all of the mental errors, mistakes, mental mistakes that's beating us and hurting us.
Have asked us not to go to the polls. They have sent representatives to various black leaders across the state saying, look, try to get your people to stay at home. And that's the Republican. Well, it's very obvious the one that and I think maintaining and strengthening the Democratic Party is more important. I don't think the issue, the Wallace issue, what I thought about Wallace 10 days ago is the same today. It hadn't changed a drop.
History records George Wallace's record. Most of what...
There's little doubt the busiest place around the school around noon is the lunchroom, and Brubaker's no exception. The lunchroom supervisor, Carrie Gostin, says more than 1,100 students move through the serving lines in less than 2 hours. It's a giant undertaking just to move that many youngsters through the lunchroom and at the same time plan and prepare the meals. Students and faculty members agree they're very pleased with the work of the lunchroom staff, and as part of National School Lunch Week, many parents are joining their children for lunch to see firsthand just how great the food is. As part of the observance, many of the schools have asked some principals, teachers, and others to plan a meal for their respective lunchrooms.
Most of the students at Brubaker Elementary School seem to agree today's lunch was terrific. Well-balanced meal of country fried steak, creamed potatoes, English peas, a roll, milk, and dessert of peach cobbler. And who planned this well-balanced meal? Mac Carmack, WSFA TV News.
Last month, the Fulmer campaign picked up the endorsement of the third-place finisher in the Democratic primary, House Speaker Joe McCorkadale. Now, with 22 days left before the November 2nd contest with George Wallace, the Fulmer staff is working harder than ever. And some members of the McCorkadale staff are still working, but for Fulmer, like McCorkadale's press secretary, David DuBose.
Well, Dennis, I made a decision and a choice as to who I was going to support for governor, just as I think every voter in Alabama should do. We have a choice of remaining in the muck and mire and turning the clock back 20 years or moving the state forward.
Was it worth it for you then to leave the Democratic Party for this?
Well, I don't think party affiliation has anything to do with it. I think that this election is so important that it transcends any past loyalties.
What about some of the other McCorkadale people? I understand there are others working here.
Right. We have Sam Braswell, who is working with the county organizations, just as he did for Speaker McCorkadale's campaign, and Gwen Schenck, who is working in the press department.
In the week ahead, the campaign will take Emory Fulmer to Tuscaloosa, Gadsden, Birmingham, and the Quad Cities area of northwest Alabama. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
The Wallace headquarters declined an invitation to appear on camera to respond to the ADC endorsement. Mr. Wallace's spokesman, Elvin Stanton, said he was pleased with the endorsement by the ADC of the entire Democratic ticket. He says he thinks that will help Wallace in November. But Mr. Stanton said he did not want to respond to Mr. Reed's personal comments about Wallace because he says he didn't hear them. But when asked if he felt if Mr. Reed's lukewarm endorsement of Wallace as an individual would hurt Wallace with the black vote in November, Mr. Stanton said he just didn't know. The former three-time governor polled an estimated 20 to 25% of the black vote in the Democratic primary and an estimated 25 to 30% of the black vote in the Democratic primary runoff. But Wallace campaigners are gearing up hard to work and attract the attention of another segment of the voting population, the young vote. Wallace has scheduled a news conference for tomorrow in Montgomery. He's expected to show up with a number of young supporters, and he's expected to say that if elected, he will choose his new cabinet from the younger generation. Wallace strategists say this is an effort to counter Republican allegations that Wallace represents old times and old cronies. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at Wallace headquarters.
It would be nice if we were invited because I feel we're the only viable alternative. We're the only party advocating something different. Like George Wallace himself said many years ago, there ain't a dime's worth of difference. There's a lot of truth to that. Both Republican and Democratic parties are just, if you want to call it this, two wings of one big government party. Both of them advocate big government. That's how they get their power. That's how they get their control over the citizens. So if they can maintain that big government status, why, we lose because we get taxed, and we lose again because then they continue to control us.
A 3-foot-long bone from a hind leg, some tooth fragments, vertebrae, and maybe some parts of forelimbs. That's all Dr. Daniel Womichel, Dr. James Doby, and some student assistants have found so far, but it's enough to make them think they may have a dinosaur on their hands.
It's hard to say right now because we don't know what dinosaur it is, and we don't know, we haven't made any detailed studies of the sediments at that place. We've just been working on it a few days. But it's probably at least 70 million years old.
Another professor from Auburn and a friend first discovered some bone fragments by Montgomery County Road 6 weeks ago. Dr. Womichel has spent many hours unearthing these bones. They're extremely fragile and must stay wrapped in plaster cast for protection. The animal the bones are believed to have come from certainly didn't need protection. Standing perhaps 10 feet tall and weighing almost a ton, it may have looked something like this.
It's a medium-sized, bipedal, probably carnivorous dinosaur. It must have been a very fast-moving, aggressive type of an animal.
This is not the first dinosaur find in central Alabama. The whole area was once under a shallow ocean. The professors don't know how much longer they'll be working at this site because they really don't know what they're going to find. They are trying to keep the location of the site a secret, because they're afraid that vandals or people who are just plain curious might damage important information. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Black leaders acknowledge their choice is now between George Wallace and Emory Fulmer. ADC Chairman Joe Reed says Wallace wasn't his first choice and Fulmer wasn't his choice at all. But after their man, George McMillan, lost a close race to Wallace in the September runoff, Reed says black leaders voted to support the straight Democratic ticket. He says it isn't a matter of personalities, but of party loyalty.
10% roughly.
Reed did say some black leaders couldn't support everyone on the Democratic slate. Reed also says his feelings about Wallace haven't changed.
I'm not comfortable with it. It's all I got in front of me.
Reed says some Republican Party members urged the black leaders not to take a position in the November election, but Reed says to remain silent in the governor's race would indirectly help Fulmer. Reed made no
very well
mistake about his
be.
feelings
I'm not
for
going
the
to debate that. I'm just simply
Republican
telling you that I know one is super rotten. And that's the Republican.
Now, black leaders will be anxious to see what Wallace will do for blacks. Reed says one of the reasons the black leaders back the Democratic Party is because it'll be sensitive to the needs of blacks, the poor, and elderly. Reed says Wallace will have to prove himself.
He can. The burden of proof is on him to show that he will. The burden of proof is on Governor Wallace to show that he will.
Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Stanley, how much has your life changed in the past year? Anything any different?
No, everything's about the same.
You fish much this year?
Well, I didn't fish much more. I fished a few more tournaments, but I fished, about the same as I done last year.
You gonna go back to those same places you had such good luck with last year first?
I don't know. I'll have to try them. I don't know if they're gonna be as good this year, but I got to try them a little bit anyhow.
If I could catch a limit of bass, keeper bass, 14-inch bass, I think I'd walk away with the tournament. And that's been my game plan for years and years. In all the tournament competition, I go for the limit first. The only problem with last year, I just didn't know where any fish were, and so I just didn't have the opportunity to work my patterns.
I think last year we only saw a little of the potential of the river. I don't think the river is it's an easy place to fish. I think it's got a lot of fish in it, and it's much like the lake I fish at home. It's not easy, but it's got a lot of fish. So I like that kind of tournament because it forces you to think and it forces you to concentrate and keep your enthusiasm up even when it slows down.
All right, as Angler of the Year, you're supposed to win, aren't you?
That's my plans.
What do you think about this river now? Do you have something definitely in mind you want to try to accomplish?
Well, I think last year I overfished a few patterns, maybe that probably the one that won the tournament, really. Didn't spend as much time doing certain little things and following the obvious structure and looking for the critical point that held the fish. And I feel like we're going to have maybe another pattern or two available to us this year that we didn't have last year.
It's a medium-sized bipedal, probably carnivorous dinosaur. Lived here about, say, somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 million years ago.
Stuff that they initially found.
And the primary.
Black leaders are not only concerned about the governor's race in Alabama, but also about the presidential election in 1984. ADC Chairman Joe Reed says putting former Governor Wallace back in office will help take the White House back from the Republicans. Reed says the black leaders discussed their move thoroughly before making a final decision.
Every other candidate we endorsed statewide won the election.
When the motion was made to support the straight Democratic ticket, the majority ruled.
We concluded that it was in the best interest of black Alabamians and best interest of the state and this nation to try to and keep supporting the Democratic Party.
Now, ADC leaders who will be encouraging blacks to vote the straight Democratic ticket will also be anxious to see what Wallace will do for blacks. Reed says the burden of proof will be left on Wallace. Mr. Reed called Wallace's opponent a strong disciple of Ronald Reagan and says Fulmer is insensitive to the needs of blacks, the working people, and education. Reed says Alabama can't afford to have a Republican in the chief executive seat.
The Republican had a decent candidate, you know, you may have second thoughts. But the person the Republicans put up, good God, perish the thought to think about what the state would be like.
Kim Day.